Hello, everybody. Well, I am excited to be here. Let's see if we get a good stream to be able to start. Tonight, I think we'd want to talk about a couple of things. We would want to talk about, there's a couple of new things happening in terms of anxiety and how I'd like to help with comfort. One is, as people are reopening, it's like a new anxiety. Shutdown was one thing. Now, when we're opening up, there's new issues. Some people feel very comfortable wanting everything back as normal. They want it. Well, I'll say they want everything back as normal, and we're starting to grieve that it's. Sorry, boy. They want everything back as normal. And I can relate to that. I'll just be honest. I'd say 85% of me sees that there's good that's going to come in things. And 15% would like things as normal. But what would not want to go back to? Well, pollution. The air is cleaner. I think in some ways we're cleaner. In some ways I think we're more thoughtful towards each other. If you look at the news or Facebook or YouTube, you might see just the worst of humanity. But you can also see the best of humanity during these times. And I think in our daily life, I'm talking to people more. People are more considerate of space in anywhere you go. Oh, I'm sorry, here, let me move, and there's not running for your life kind of thing. I think there's a kindness that's happening with people. I can focus on the negative. People are driving kind of rough where I work, and it's like I think people are letting off steam with anger. But the point I want to make is that we're not all at the same place, and we need a lot more tolerance, patience, and compassion with where people are. There are people still in their home. I talked with a friend today, hadn't really left their home at all. And it's like, whoa, I'm a little bit more out there. I've gone to a few restaurants. I've gone on vacation and actually had fun in the midst of it. I will confess, I went to a couple of thrift stores. I wear a mask and I make sure that I'm not infecting anyone else or near dangerous situations. But we went and looked around. Is kind of what we do. We don't buy a lot. I did buy a shirt, and I just keep it in a place where then I just take it to the laundry and wash it. I think if we get stuck, we think the coronavirus germs can't be killed. Oh no, they can actually be killed with a bar of soap. And I think we have to rely on facts that we now know that they don't really live on surfaces as long as we thought in real life. In a lab, they can. So it's not like it's not a little nasty little virus, but we just have to adjust the risks. We could be stronger people for this as a result. Anyway, I don't want to go off into that. So I think just patience, kindness, tolerance is really helpful. So a couple of weeks ago, we talked about cognitive distortions. I also wanted to talk about triggers. I've had my own triggers this week with having, well, a physical. And so I feel better if I don't go get a physical, because then I start to think about health. And when I think about health, I start to not have good health. Not a hypochondriac technically. I would have more a somatoform, not even that if we wanted to use clinical language, somatization, and I've known that for a long time, that we channel our feelings into our bodies. So there were little triggers with higher numbers than I wanted in my labs, and so I found myself hyper-focused on that, hyper-focused. And I'm learning how not to hyper-focus. If you get good exercise, sleep, nutrition, and know you're doing it, and you practice a connection with God, you can learn to tell your mind that you're not going to hyper-focus on this. But it's hard. Sometimes it's easy to redirect it. Sometimes it's not hard. I mean, it's hard. Like a person gets OCD, brain lock, they can't change their mind. That's all they're focusing on all day long. Perseverating is a clinical word for that. Ruminating. So we're going to talk about how to get free from that. But yeah, let's see. Triggers. I want to weave in triggers because triggers can trigger us. And we're not talking about just assaultive thoughts. It could be a time of day, an event. And in my situation, my health records were on my chart. So I went and got my labs done, and it was early in the morning. I had to, can I show this? I think I will. I have this irritable bladder, and I'm working through the psychological aspects of it. But just knowing I'm going to drive to Seattle, but I need to have a full bladder because when I did not drink enough water, it made my labs look like I had kidney disease, which kind of frightened me. I've had that happen about 3 times, so it's a trigger going on since 2013. So, but I do know that God's in control, and I'm going to learn from this. This is good. If I had no pain and suffering, I wouldn't be any use to anybody else, and I probably wouldn't be human, and I probably wouldn't be living on this planet Earth. So I went to Seattle just fine. No real like, oh no, I have to pee. There's no way to get off the road. I could stop by Chaz and or Chop because the clinic is right next door to there. Nope, I was fine. And so it shows you that we make ourselves miserable. We do this to ourselves, and I'm not trying to be unkind. It's just something I really believe. It's not the world that causes us problems. It's our response to the world. And I think we need to have compassion for people that are struggling, because you add up a couple of things that they go through, and that can put you in a chemical downward spiral or a spiritual downward spiral or a physiological, relational, and you feel so stuck that you feel like you're going to be there forever. And we have to be compassionate to help people know that, no, this is not how this ends. This is just a thing that I need to change and grow with. So I do the test. Now my tendency is to want to check online my chart. It's a trigger. And I'll say I knew it wasn't going to be ready. I had this thought, how impatient we are. In the old days, you would have waited for a phone call or something in the mail. Now we want it within hours, as if, and I'll be humorous here, they're going to rush Eric Boland's pee, just deliver it quick, and it's all going to be about this. And there was a test that the doctor was going to do that had to do with an in-depth look for kidney disease. Because the reality is my dad suffered from it, passed away from it, and other things. And I, back in January, had a test. I won't go into the long story there, but that's the one that looked like I had kidney disease. The doctor, being a very kind doctor, did say, well, you should probably go to a kidney specialist. He was picking one out. This is right before Corona. And I said, well, you know, I actually told him how the test went, and it was really not the way to do the urine test. And he says, let's do my test. So I ran down there the next day, was fine. The next 2 days, fine. So that's triggers. I mean, that's so my chart, if I got anything with my chart, well, guess what? As Providence would have it, the my chart thing, I didn't do the right password, so it got locked over the weekend, so I couldn't check. It's like, Eric Bolin, you need to calm down. And I'm making this maybe a little bit worse than it was because I made a lot of progress. But it's like, no, I'm not going to use this day that the Lord has made to be obsessed on that. Okay? To bring it up to speed, I ended up having 2 or 3 more my chart notifications. Triggers me like, okay, here it is. And I pray a prayer, let go. God, whatever you want it to be, help me to endure it. Help me to be strong. So this is just one trigger. Other triggers could be watching the news, watching anything that looks like our economy is going towards socialism or going down the path of coronavirus for some. Like higher numbers could trigger people. It appears that this is just a huge trigger for people. Okay? I mean, for years we thought this meant surgery. I've had like 3 more, maybe 4 surgeries. They always smile at you through the mask and saying you're going to be fine, and they touch your hand, your shoulder, and yeah. But that's what we're used to seeing, and so to see it on everybody, some people see it as apocalyptic. I do think what's fun is my wife was and I were at a farmer's market, and she's looking at fashion ones. It's like, maybe that's what we need to cheer things up. So, yeah, triggers. So if we look at cognitive distortions, and I want to make sure I have my 15 cognitive distortions here. Yeah, from Psych Central. I think I will use the handy screen capture here. I haven't mastered how to get rid of that funky view, but I'm assuming you can see what I see. This is by John Grohl. He's the developer of this website. It's been around for years. What is a cognitive distortion? Why do so many people have them? From a spiritual point of view, I would say it's the result of the fall. I mean, this is what's happened. And in fact, I'll go back to talking a little bit here. I'm trying not to here. I think it would be just a distraction there. Okay. Mankind, after they partook of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, became darkened in their understanding. And there is something that Christianity talks about that describes a part of our soul, an aspect of our soul called the nous. The nous was that highest form of a part of the soul. And it was the part that would have attended towards God, attention there. Well, in the fall, it got like spiritual ADD. It can't focus. It now focuses on anything else. It focuses on pleasures. Everything's about having sex, or everything's about eating, or everything's about work, or having the best house on earth, or the best property, or the best children. It could be the best counselor, the best, it focuses on something on this earth. And if you see the movie Top Gun, and there's a few scenes that are not the best scenes, but it's where I first saw this, that there's this device where when they had a target, and it would get there and it would click, and then wherever that target moved, the gun would actually follow it. It was pretty cool. And that technology is how they do laser surgery on your eye, is that um, once it gets it set, even if your eyes move, I believe that it's going in the right direction. Like, open your eye, don't move. I don't see that happening. So that's what this is like when we get hyper focused. Our noose is now attending to our fears. It's attending to the passion. If the enemy isn't trying to take us down the path of pleasure, he takes us down the path of pain and pain avoidance, and will do anything to avoid it. So then everything becomes a focused on that. So these cognitive distortions are part of what's going on there. And so Aaron Beck, we talked about a couple of weeks ago, and David Burns. So we talked about 3 processes: generalization, deletion, and distortion, from the work of neuro-linguistic programming. And I guess to filtering. Filtering is where we don't see the positives, we just see the negatives. That's actually what the news media is. It's not going to bring us positive because it doesn't sell. Polarized thinking, we have a lot of this going on. And it's actually not just harming us individually, but it's harming us as a society. And polarization. So if I say something to someone that suggests, hey, maybe you would do better if you was a little bit easier going on your children, say, like, a polar responder would go to the other extreme and say, so you want me to coddle my child? Is that what you're saying? No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that. Or are you saying I'm a bad parent? No. So that would be kind of personalization. So polarized thinking, you feel the energy go, the contrariness. If someone says it's really maybe good to wear a mask for protection with the coronavirus, the opposite would be, this is just a plot to try to shut down our freedom of speech. Maybe there's a chance, but maybe it's about the virus. I'm not making a political comment on this. I'm just saying this is how this works. The people that it's looking at how someone says something and you take it to the extreme. And this is when we're hearing it, but when we do this ourselves, like, I'm all bad, I have no friends. People that do EEG biofeedback with me that struggle with OCD, I will say, and I have to be very specific, like, how are things going? And they say, well, it's not going well. And I understand that. So then we ask, how is anxiety? It hasn't changed at all. Why would they say that? Because they look at how it's still there. But then I ask the mother or a loved one there, and they go, well, they're not hand washing half as much. And it's like, whoa, that's huge, 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 huge. So that's polarized, overgeneralization, jumping to conclusions, catastrophizing, we're all going to die, personalizing, you hate me. No, I just said we couldn't meet for lunch. Control fallacies. So this one I wanted to kind of focus on. This distortion involves 2 different but related beliefs about being in complete control of every situation in a person's life. In the first, if we feel externally controlled, we see ourselves as a helpless victim of fate. For example, I can't help it if the quality of the work is poor. My boss demanded I work overtime on it. By the way, this relates to racism and systemic racism. And I'm not saying that there aren't other factors, okay? But I do think that there is a factor here that when you don't, when you don't feel like you have control and the world dominates you and you get victim mentality, then you feel like there's nothing I can do to better my situation. I've had some really, really rough childhood experiences, and somehow I got out of victim mentality. I mean, I still can have it, but someone in my therapy journey said, no, no, we are the cause of our own misery. And this explains why some people are able to rise above dire circumstances. And there was a study, and I don't want this to be taken wrong, but we are more than flies, obviously, but this was a fly study where they had all these flies in this jar, and they had put some piece of fruit, made them stand there, put a lid on there, okay? It had holes and stuff for them to breathe, and they had to live there. And they would try to fly out, but they'd hit their little tiny heads on the ceiling of the lid, and they got stuck there. After, I forget, maybe a week, they learned to not even try to fly out. Okay, so we unlift the lid, and that's right, these flies don't fly out. That even though they're set free, they don't. It's through behavior, and we all relate to this. We all relate to this because we have these invisible. We have a prison that we can live in at times, and the bars are invisible to us. We just hold ourselves into that. Guess what, though? In this study, some flies fly out. And they're trying to study what causes those flies to continue to try to get out of a circumstance. I think that's really a fascinating thing. Yeah, no, I tend not to go down as a therapist or a coach down the path of victimization. And I do know good therapist friends that they say things like, well, it's because they have ADD, that's why they can't. It's like, no. No, a person can learn to overcome things. And I see it. I see people who are people of faith. They pray, and I mean, I think someone in my life celebrated 15 years free from cancer. She had 1 year, horrible situation, get through that, just the next year to get it again, and went through an 11-day period where I think it was stem cell, where nothing was there in her immune system for 11 days. Either it was going to go one direction or the other. And I remember people thinking, I don't know how this is going to look, because it looked kind of bleak. But the person's alive and well today. So go figure. Go figure. It shows you who's really in control. You know, that God has a plan, and if it's our time to go, then it's our time to go. And see, that's the idea of control. God is in control. Everything is in his hands. He's just not controlling. And I remember, and I mean this politely about my family growing up, but I learned that there was a cause effect, that everything had to have a cause. And so I remember I'll just say this, my brother had thrown up. I think someone threw up. My grandmother, bless her heart, says, well, I wonder what it was. And my dad says, Mama, stop. We don't need to figure out what it was. This just happens. About 10 minutes later, well, I wonder what it was. And so that's needing to have a cause for everything, because a cause has to do with control. And I mean this politely to I love these people. They're family, but my grandfather lived to be 96, I think. Well, he didn't. The hospital killed him because there had to be a cause. It couldn't be old age. So my grandmother looked for what happened that made him die. You see, and so the opposite of that is sometimes things just happen. Sometimes things happen. In fact, a lot of times things happen. Now, if I believe in God, which I do, I could say, well, then God is the cause of all that, and that leads down another path. So things just don't happen without some heavenly or divine guidance here. So if we get a flat tire, it could be that I didn't, regularly look at the tire and inspect them, but I could do that perfectly and still end up with a flat tire. I could drive down the most perfect road possible to prevent a flat tire and still end up one. I could be a vegan person who eats really, really healthy, exercise, and still get cancer. And I know people who have experienced that. In my practice, it kind of was a shocker. And so we are not in control of everything, believe it or not. And so how do we live with that tension of not being in control of the universe? That's the $1,000,000 question. That's what's really important. We learn to let go, and we learn to realize I can influence reality. I can have an effect on things, and the best effect I could have is when I'm asked and when I'm connected with God and having power inside me to cooperate in this world with Him, and then I'll have peace. If I am trying to strive in my own strength, for instance, let's take the coronavirus. I tend towards not wanting to cause anybody else to be ill. I could wear a dozen masks. I could dip myself in alcohol. And I could still probably give it to someone. That sounds extreme. But the point I'm trying to make is that I think we need to be reasonable with divine guidance on taking precautions. But OCD is like it sorts for how might I still be carrying germs to someone? How might this happen accidentally? And since I tend towards that way, and I have to be careful not to be proud or judge people, but like, for instance, if I take the mask off, I'm not going to wear it here so that then when I hug someone, I'm just giving this germ-infected thing for 10 hours, as if it's been on that long. Am I going to put it in my pocket? Or am I going to put it in the same pocket with my keys? No, I'm going to put it in my back pocket. But I'm going to say that it's good enough. Okay? Let's see. Let's go back to... the internal control has to do with assuming responsibility for the pain and happiness of everyone around us. So I'm not sure why that's internal. I guess external and internal means how much control do I have as a person. Yeah, and that would be an inordinate sense of self. It would be pride. For instance, that's right. If I would be the cause of the coronavirus in a group of people and it's all my fault, it's like, no, I'm going to have to chill. And relax with that one. And come up with standards and policies. For instance, this was interesting. This was an interesting experience because for me, I had to learn to adjust. But at one time, coronavirus in labs could live on surfaces of things for a long time. When the CDC said, you know what, it's really not as bad as we think. In a lab, it can last a lot longer, but in real life, it's unlikely for it to be there for days. So I adjusted a little bit in my thinking. Like with groceries, I wasn't going to disinfect them as much. Knowing that it lives on cardboard for 30 minutes, um, I'm just not going to freak out about that. If I die, I die. But I don't want to be spraying off this is just me personally, spraying off things with the germs and setting them outside. Now, if I had cancer, if I had some, I might be more cautious. And this is the point I'm getting at, is we don't want to judge others that feel the need to do that. We want to bear with those that, and I don't even want to use word weak, but that's what the Bible says. We want to bear with those that have a different opinion of things, as I would want people to bear with mine. You know, I think love and respect, grace, humility is really important. All this is humbling. All mankind, as good as science is, it obviously didn't have the answers for everything, and it can't predict the future. So people are doing the best they know to do. And, well, should I make this funny joke? Why all the toilet paper? You know, it's because people got a little anal. And they felt like, I've got to make sure that I have some kind of control there. So the fallacy of fairness. This is a big one. It's just big, and we feel resentful that life is not treating me right. I personally think that this is a spiritual one. I do think that somehow the enemy didn't feel like things were fair. And so he got a grudge, and I'm not an expert on all that, but so he afflicts us with this, that life isn't fair. Why do I have this? I've heard some things this week that make my hair curl. Like, how do people survive this? How do they survive it? I feel like, who am I to be helping them? Because they've endured this, and they still smile, they still wake up and face the day. So since I am there, I pray, and Lord, help me help them. And we all have different crosses to bear. So I do know that they survive it well by not even going down so much the path of whether things are fair. The solution is to think God has a plan for my life, and I need to surrender into it. The more I wrestle against it, the worse it gets. So, can we lighten our pain and suffering? Yes, I really believe that. I believe that our pain and suffering is because we may be holding the standard, like, I want to not suffer, I don't want the trials that have been given to me, or I'm somehow really a bad person that I had this visit upon me, or just make it go away. You know, there are people that lived a pretty comfortable life. This is an interesting pattern for most of their life. Then something hits the fan, like catastrophic stuff, in their 30s or 40s or 50s. The poor soul struggles because it's almost like they don't have an emotional immune system. Everything kind of went their way. Captain of the football team, a good job, good college, a good girlfriend, a good wife. Everything just, and it was this illusion of control, but then things hit the fan. My youth was difficult, so I almost had an immune system that had, I just don't struggle the same way because life is better now than it was then. So, fairness. Yeah. Mercy, and mercy is kind of the opposite of fair. Because if I remember hearing a talk show host on radio, it was Dave Ramsey, and he actually would ask, how are you doing? Better than I deserve. And that's really a true statement, really. If I look at my my challenge is I have so many more good things happen to me than bad. Um, so I'm going to check in here, see if we have any questions in our live stream. Not yet, but that's okay. I will be honest, sometimes I feel like this might be boring to people. I will try to improve. Blaming. When I do a neurological EEG, there is this question that's interesting, and it has to do with the brain. Do we spend more time trying to blame what happened rather than just searching for a solution? And this kind of relates to what caused my problem, rather than, it doesn't matter, just search for a solution. Like if I go to the doctor with a sore throat, the doctor doesn't ask, well, how did you get the sore throat? I don't know. He doesn't, well, we got to figure that out. Yeah, no, just make it go away. And some things, and I worked with a person over the phone with addiction. I said, therapy can be challenging with addiction because it looks for causes. And this guy asked a great question. He says, well, looking at all my underlying childhood issues and all that, helped me get free. In my opinion, with addiction, no. I mean, you get free by following 12 steps. After that, you can look at underlying issues, but I know lots of people have spent years and years of therapy, and they focus on the steps with me. In 4 months, they're sober, and they go, wow. And that's that illusion of control, that if I can figure something out, it'll make it go away. Not necessarily. And addiction's strange. If I work with a lot of people that are done with their addictions, and we can ask them gently, hey, how did you overcome it? And they will almost always say, is I didn't have much to do with it. God did, or my higher power. I just took certain steps. But it's really kind of a holy mystery. So blame really is this kind of control thing, that it's your fault that I'm suffering. And so if I control you, in fact, this goes down to this one. The fallacy of change. A person expects that other people will change to suit them if they just pressure or cajole them enough. I'm going to change the world around me, and then therefore I will feel better. Not necessarily so. Because even if everything went back, say like with the coronavirus, there's no threat of people losing their freedoms or rights or anything, we'd be upset about something else. We probably would. So why not this? And it's serious. I'm not trying to make light of it, but it's what we have to deal with. When a person engages in blaming, they hold other people responsible for their emotional pain. I would go beyond and just not make it about people, but about events. Again, this is a deep thing that it's in the Bible. The Apostle Paul talks about this, that it's a secret to learn to be content with much or with little, in prison or not in prison. Here I thought I was screen capturing that. Might not have been. To learn to be content with whatever circumstances. I think if we get healed enough, it would be really hard to blame anybody for anything. That may sound funny. But like even probably some of the worst enemies I know, and it's okay to have enemies. Okay, I'll share this. I was doing work at Vacation Bible School with someone, and this lady, they were singing a song that had to do with overcoming our enemies by the power of thy cross. And this little girl asked, who are our enemies? And the lady, without batting an eye, said, well, our thoughts, honey. Like, wow, I was helping out, and I'll never forget that. So our enemies often are our thoughts. That's the biggest thing we have to fight. And yes, there is an enemy, a spiritual enemy. And yes, there may be physical people that are governed by principalities of the air, difficult things there. But really, it's really hard. But in our earthly news gets distracted, we start to think that it's this group of people or that group of people. There's certain people trying to change America, or no, that's not our enemies. Our enemies are, and if we change them, as if that would make us happy. Yeah, I think we can find happiness by accepting the world as it is, and praying for people and praying for power. Basically, we can do just about anything if we have the appropriate power. I shared this in one of the other live casts about thinking about how could one endure temptation or persecution. There was someone I heard that had been in a prison for 18 years, and then even after that got tortured. This was a woman who we honor. And it's all God's power. It has to be God's power. I can even do the basic, simple things in life. So what makes me think I could do more than that? Well, I have to empty myself of me and become humble and allow God's energy to come live in me and interact with me. A good key word here is synergeron, synergy, to work. Syn meaning with, ergon meaning work, to work together with him. Apart from me, you can do nothing. And yeah, really important concept there. Shoulds. And here I think I'm screen capturing, but I'm not. Oh, I might have inadvertently learned. I might have inadvertently learned how to do that. We shall see. I should do this. I should do that. I'm not a fan of this being that distorted, a distorted thing, because I think that there are things we should do. I think the deeper underlying philosophy under it has to do with I really want to. Like, I should pay taxes before the 15th. Well, I don't have to, but I really want to. I should take each day as it's my last. Why would I use the word should? It's like an obligation. Because for me, that works. I could say, I need to be in touch with that. I need to be aware that each day could be my last day. I should love my wife, my son and daughter more, and my son-in-law now. I should. I believe it. I think where it becomes a useful tool is that, well, let's just read this and pick it apart. For example, I really should exercise. I shouldn't be so lazy. Musts and oughts are also offenders. The emotional consequence is guilt. When a person directs should statements towards others, they often feel angry, frustrated, and resentful. Now, I think sometimes that's not a bad thing. Is it my job to inflict guilt upon people? No. Does it happen? It does. I hate to say this, but in working with people who, well, all of us can improve. And I have felt guilty, ashamed of myself. Did it produce good fruit in my life? It did. And I'm not so sure that I would have changed had I not had to suffer like that. For instance, this is a great example. So my cholesterol went to 208. I usually hang around 168. What happened? I ate too many chips. I was breaking some of my dietary rules and ate sugar. Now, I do think apart from all that, stress causes cholesterol to go up. So should I exercise? Absolutely. Should I eat better? Yes. Yes. I could use a must. So now if I were swimming in this as a client, I would probably help a person avoid all that. If someone came to me and told me, well, and my doctor, bless his heart. Now, what's funny is I love him because he's so healthy oriented. And he said, I said, well, should I lose weight? Given that I gained, in my opinion, 20 pounds, but he said it was only 10. He says, that would be a really good idea to do. I said, well, I know what to do because I need these numbers to come down. My glucose went to 102. He said he wasn't worried because my A1C, my PSA was a little bit higher. Not that that can control that. I'm going to look at how I need to do this. And what's going to motivate me is to realize I can't do this in my own strength. I have to empty myself. This would empty myself so God's grace can come into me. And I have to be free from resentments, fears, dishonesty, and selfishness is kind of the OA, Overeaters Anonymous approach. If I start building up fears, anxiety, grudges, resentful, actually turn on YouTube and look at the news and you end up with that. And so no wonder I'm chomping on chips, okay? So if I can see clearly and see the end result, do I want my children pushing me around in a wheelchair? Do I want my actions today to cause others to suffer because I can't do certain things? No. Now, does it guarantee that that won't happen? No. I could end up do everything right, end up in a stroke situation, and my kids end up taking care of me. So I can do my best. I can pray and ask God for guidance. Boy, I'm just swimming around and saying the same kind of thing. I apologize there. It's a little bit redundant. Emotional reasoning. I love this one. Emotional reason. Oh, okay. So I'm here now. What I'm going to do is switch right to the screen capture. Nope, it doesn't work because I go to this temporary. Well, it's right here. Emotional reasoning is when the middle part of our brain, here if we use this here, the middle part, the limbic system starts to take over. It feels so powerful that we think this must be true. So I have to say, are facts feeling? Or are feelings facts? No, facts or feelings are not facts. And I ask people, have you ever felt like something really bad was going to happen, but it didn't? Yes. That's not a fact. I can feel all I want about a so-called danger or this is good for me. Like I could eat a cherry pie and only register the feelings of what it's like at the beginning. And is that good for me? No. If it feels this good, it must be good for us. No, that's not a fact. Other strange things since I was kind of on the dietary side of things. And the coronavirus things. Like when it's sunny weather like this, it feels like that there wouldn't be as many germs. Um, what sciences are based on that? We thought it might die with sunlight. It doesn't appear so, at least from the news, if that's true. Um, I could feel that because of circumstances, eating a piece of cherry pie wouldn't harm me, wouldn't raise cholesterol levels and triglycerides. No, that's a fallacy. That's emotional reasoning. Now, if I decide to have a piece of pie because I feel like I want it, that's okay. It's just that I shouldn't pretend that it's not, that my body's going to react differently to it, because it sees it as still those molecules, and it's still going to process it the right way, or the wrong. Well, it's going to process it the way it is. Now, I will say this about our bodies: it is interesting. Um, Intention and how things are used. I think our body has a wisdom. For instance, I had a chiropractor, really nice guy, say, and I was having a surgery coming up, and he says, "Well, you know, Eric, your body doesn't know the difference between being stabbed and having a physician um, cut on you for the surgery." And I immediately responded with a disagreement. I said, "No, I don't believe that at all." I, and I quickly said to him, "So you pushing me against the wall, cracking my back, I don't know the difference between you doing that for healing and someone trying to mug me." And he laughed. I said, "No, when we go through pain and suffering with the thought that this is going to be good for me, we heal. If we go in with this thinking it's bad and feeling like this is bad, this can't be good for me, it makes it worse. It makes the suffering worse. That's why I think being able to, it says, rule over one's spirit is like a man who can rule over a city. It's really important to learn how to do that. Really, I'm more convinced than ever. We have a zillion books out there, a zillion classes, but I think if we can learn how our brains operate, it helps so much to go, okay, I'm in cingulate gyrus mode, meaning OCD, kind of like overthinking. I'm going to do something that's really going to snap me out of that. And I've done that so that I'm not hyper focused on things. Yeah, walking down to the beach. I've walked down to the lake, I think a few nights in a row, and it gets easier and easier. Going up this big hill, I started playing marching music to it. This started with the 4th of July. It was easier to do. Go figure. Because it had to do with my mentality. My limbic system got engaged. I was talking with my sister up the hill. I was huffing and puffing, but I was so engaged in the conversation that I forgot. I don't even know if I stopped to rest. So, how many of us has felt so depressed that our bodies feel heavy? And when we get good news or our spirits lighten, we feel lighter. It's the same body. I don't think that the scale, if I got on a scale, it would be different. But that perception is way different. And we use phrases like lighten up. And I think we need that during these times. We need to be able to look at cognitive distortions and to see that, first of all, they're affecting how we feel. And if we're going to look at the internet, which I think is useful, we want to be able to see what cognitive distortions or filters or triggers are triggering us to seeing what we see, because all those other happy sites are out there too. But during COVID, it's like you couldn't turn to a site without a COVID banner. And I recently decided to take it off my websites because it doesn't need to be there anymore. People know that we're doing COVID safety precautions, and it's just one more trigger, I think, that triggers people. So let's check in here, see if there's any questions. With that, we might begin to wind down here. But I think I'll finish with triggers. Like distorted thinking, if you don't know that you're being triggered, then you can't, then you're at the mercy of your triggers. So I'm going to try to get off these favorite topics, these two-track. I've been talking a lot about diet, talking about health and COVID, but like triggers are really powerful. I've had people have what is called an anniversary reaction. When their child turns 3, it triggers internal things, what was going on in their world as a 3-year-old. And once they make the connection, it's like, wow, they just get all this insight. So they were triggered, or they were triggered by a person, them giving love, affection to their child where they may not have gotten that love and affection. So it triggers this emptiness and this pain. I know people whose parents separated when they were 16, and for whatever reason, when their oldest daughter is 16, they feel like leaving their spouse. It's the strangest thing. Or people whose parents only lived to be a certain age, they feel like they're not going to live past that age. Speaking of birthdays trigger feelings. They trigger all the feelings of being sung happy birthday to you and all that, the cake. But as we get older, we start to self-reflect. We start to think about our mortality, our achievements, what have we accomplished, what we haven't accomplished. We can feel pretty miserable self-analyzing that way. And in some ways, if you kind of do a self-examination every day, it gets better. Same thing with Christmas to New Year's. They're triggers or losses, people who aren't with us anymore. We may, in the middle of March, be okay, but during a time when we're doing an event, like I think of my father, who's no longer with us, 4th of July, I will walk downstairs similar to how he would have, and that cadence and it's really funny how things trigger us, trigger memories. I had some cherry pie for the 4th of July. That is kind of a man-made trigger because it's what feels like the 4th of July to me. Triggers for positive, for some of us, stepping inside a church. All those times we spent in there, we feel comfort. Seeing a good friend, we just feel better. It goes back to when we're a small child and our mother most likely would have kissed the boo-boo, would have helped us feel better. It calms us down. It releases chemicals. Dads can trigger us to be stronger. We just feel like we can do it because these things, come on, you can do this, but I don't think I can. Other positive triggers are seasons. Summer triggers certain things. Holidays triggers certain things. I'm trying to stick with the positive triggers before we go into the negative. Stepping on a scale and losing some weight, you feel better, you feel healthier. If the weight is not what you want it to be, you feel sluggish and unhealthy. Certain clothes you put on, now I decided to wear these because I love this blue. it's so Hawaiian. And I was in Hawaii with my wife during our anniversary, and yeah, and you know what's funny? I bought this here. I'm so frugal. I decided to go buy Hawaiian shirts here at used thrift stores, and so I probably got it for a few bucks. Well, I mean, clean them and then pack them to Hawaii, and so I didn't need to buy one there for $30. You know, it was fine, and that was the first time I wore them. See, I didn't really wear them any time, so it feels like I got them from Hawaii. Hawaii, just looking at beautiful tropical ocean. Like, even though there's so many difficulties in this world, I look at the simplest of things, trying to find a flower embedded in a sidewalk, or um, trees, scents. There's certain hobbies and crafts that can produce comfortable feelings. A certain blanket. Oh, now I'm on a roll. Comfort blankets. Yeah, blankets are really important. They seem to go way back to when we were a child and swaddled uh, in blankets. And we carry that blanket with us, and it feels so emotionally important to have that. Or a teddy bear. It makes us feel okay. Um, I jokingly say, hey, teddy bears and blankets aren't fattening, they're not illegal, and they're really not that expensive. Go for it if we needed to hold that. For a while, I'd say early in my practice, it was very popular for therapists to have um, bears. In fact, I guess I will be funny today. So, I am bringing this bear. This is probably one of the best bears around, and he's lasted. I will confess. I was at a conference with my wife on laughter therapy. Annette Goodhart was her name, and she talked about how laughter is good for us. It massages internal organs. It helps us release pain. Anxiety, it can help with. There is a laughing, nervous laughter, but if we give more into it, I think there's other spiritual things that help in that. We shouldn't be laughing uncontrollably, but laughing is letting go of control. That's why we slap our hands. Anyway, she had these for sale, and they were $100. Oh, what was I thinking? $100. But guess what? This bear is like an adult size huggable bear. And I've had him probably 30 years. And he has helped a lot of people. Discomfort. I don't use him much anymore because of the coronavirus. But yeah, cats. Cats can trigger you. We'll talk about the positive side. They lower blood pressure. They are comforting. They are their own person. They help you not think about yourself because they want you to think about them. Now, cats can trigger us in another direction too. Some of us just immediately start getting stuffy nose because we get triggered. Triggers for anxiety. Okay, we'll start going down the path of trigger for anxiety. A lot of triggers for anxiety have to do with feeling out of control. So whether it's being in a stadium, a movie theater, large groups of people, we just feel out of control. An upcoming event, a dental appointment, we may have anxiety because there could be pain, but we've gone a whole bunch of other times in theory. But it's just we don't know what's going to happen. I have clients tell me they like coming here, but they're always nervous. Yeah, I know how it is because you just never know how is it going to go, what's going to happen. Um, because there's this fear of the unknown, like what's inside me that can come out. Um, highway can trigger fear in people. Seeing a car accident by the side of the road. Now, how is that a trigger? What happens is we over-identify, some of us, we over-identify, we think that, oh my gosh, that could be me, I can feel the pain. What if that happened to me? And now I'm in a wheelchair the rest of my life. How would I support my family, etc.? All that catastrophic thinking just because we were driving. Hearing words from a newscaster, just that alone can trigger anxiety. It's okay to have some anxiety, but it's just important to know the triggers. If I don't want to be triggered, don't watch the news. And there are a lot of people that do that. And the thinking on that as well, for a while we fasted from the news. We kind of go, anything we'll need to know, we'll learn from people. And maybe we should go back to that. We'll see. Triggers to fall asleep. So those that suffer from insomnia, just the fact that it's now bedtime triggers anxiety, like I'm not going to be able to fall asleep. Or, physicals can trigger anxiety. Going to see relatives can trigger anxiety for some. Kids going to summer camp, going to school can trigger anxiety. Let's move away from anxiety. Let's talk a little bit about physical pains. Our body is so interesting in that I know people who had for years had back pain, and because they were told by medical doctors, they so equated it with certain things like, lifting heavy things can trigger back pain. Even just bending over to pick a newspaper up. This doctor I know, really great guy, said for years he just had so associated with it, he'd have back pain. And so then you can unlearn these things. And I had pain getting up out of the bed, getting in bed. Just getting in and out of the car, walking upstairs, standing in church, sitting for too long, sitting in a plane, getting up. Just the thought of going through security, lugging suitcases, all that stuff. And I did it many times to where I made it through, but you would have thought I would have just rinsed it out of my system. No, I had to actually purposefully pray through it and realize I just didn't get triggered. Oh, even walking up the hill, I mentioned, while talking to my sister. See, I didn't get triggered to some of the tiredness or the fear of, I hope, a back spasm. When you've had some back spasms that are so spasming, then your brain looks like, I don't want to pay attention to that. I don't want to experience that again. The problem is that's too much coping, too overboard. It's very similar to a panic attack. Then we start avoiding things to avoid panic. So anyway, we'll talk more about triggers, but we'll talk about the solution with triggers later. But just noticing them, praying through them. It's good to be here. It's good to be alive. I wish you all the best. And you take care. I'm just going to check one more thing. Yeah, you take care, and we shall see you later. Have a good one. Bye-bye.